Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin in Numbers chapter 32, verse 1. Now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a very great multitude of livestock. And when they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that indeed the region was a place for livestock, the children of Gad and the children of Reuben came and spoke to Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and the leaders of the congregation, saying, Adaroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Eliah, Shabam, Nebo, and Beon, the country which the Lord defeated before the congregation of Israel, is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. Therefore they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not take us over the Jordan. So here, you're not in the promised land, but you've just defeated the Midianite kings in all of these places. And now these two tribes are saying, look, we have a lot of livestock. We have a lot of people. This land is great for us. This land here is great for us. So if we found favor in your eyes, just let us stay here as a and have this land as a possession. Don't take us over the Jordan. I know God has promised us an inheritance in the land of milk and honey, but we think we've found it here. We think we've found it here on this side of the Jordan. And Moses said to the children of Gad and to the children of Reuben, shall your brethren go to war while you sit here? Now why will you discourage the heart of the children of Israel from going over into the land which the Lord has given them? Thus your fathers did when I sent them away from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. For when they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the hearts of the children of Israel, so that they did not go into the land which the Lord had given them. So he's saying, look, are you really doing this again? You're going to sit here while your brethren go off in the war to go subdue the promised land. And you're going to discourage their hearts by saying you want to stay here, just like your fathers did 40 years ago when you were wandering and doing nothing. So you had to wander and die. Now you, the new generation, had learned nothing and decided you want this land. That you want this land now, not the land the Lord promised. So the Lord's anger was aroused on that day, and he swore an oath, saying, surely none of the men who came up from Israel, from 20 years old and above, shall see the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me, except Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, and Joshua the son of Nun, for they have wholly followed the Lord. So Moses is just going to recount for these two tribes, look, you're going to do this again. Do you not remember what happened with the wandering? We came to Kadesh Barnea, we sent in spies, they discouraged the people from going in. Now you're going to do the same exact thing, really. So verse 13, so the Lord's anger was aroused against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone. And look, you have risen in your father's place, a brood of sinful men, to increase still more the fierce anger of the Lord against Israel. For if you turn away from following him, he will once again leave them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all of these people. Look at the wilderness. You're going to leave all of these people here to die in the wilderness. That's what you're going to do. You're going to bring the Lord's anger against this generation as well, and you're going to have all of us wander again in the wilderness to die, and you're going to kill all these people because you want this land instead of the land the Lord promised you. Because you think you've found the best place for yourself instead of going to where the Lord has called you to. Then they came near to him and said, we will build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones, but ourselves will be armed and ready to go before the children of Israel until we have brought them in their place. And our little ones will dwell in fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every one of the children of Israel has received his inheritance. For we will not inherit with them on the other side of the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has fallen to us on this eastern side of the Jordan. So they're saying, look, we will go and fight, but we're going to stay here. We're going to build sheepfolds. We're going to build cities. We're going to build fortified cities so our wives and children are protected from these people who now want to kill us because we killed a bunch of them. We're not going to go in, but we're going to go out and fight. We're going to send all of our fighting men out with you. And we're not going to worry about an inheritance there because our inheritance will be here. This is where our lot's fallen. Our lot's fallen here because we've chosen it, not God, basically. And we're going to go off and fight. Now, I believe that fighting would end up lasting 7 years, which means they leave their wives and children and livestock. For 7 years, they miss their children growing up. They are not teaching their children the ways of the Lord, which is why the tribes on the other side of the Jordan end up falling into different idolatry. They also end up falling to their enemies at a quicker rate because they are the first ones to be pulled off in the exile because they are separated from the rest of the nation. Or nations at that point. But they have chosen. They understand better than God. We have found this place that we think is abundant, not God. We have found this abundant place. And we want this more than anything God can give us, because we believe where we are now is better than where God can take us. And not to spiritualize this too much, but this is what we do as human beings. This is why we fear death so much. This is why when we think of things like the rapture or the coming kingdom of God, regardless of where you want to put the rapture, it's irrelevant to that point. But we think, well, Lord, come soon. Maranatha, Lord, come soon. But I also want my kid to grow up. I want my kid to get married. I want to see my grandkids. Lord, so as much as I want you to come now, I don't want to miss out on the things of the earth because we like it here. We like what we get to experience here. We're married here. We have our children here. When we're in heaven, we won't have these same things. Jesus told us there won't be marriage in heaven as it is here. So we won't understand what it's like. But we're happy here. So as much as we want to see the next thing, we don't want to give up what we know to be good here and to be enjoyable here because we can't imagine what will be that much better there. I believe it was C.S. Lewis, but it might not have been, who had written that it was our lives and the lives of that we will have in heaven is like an adult trying to explain things to a child about being married and the joys of being married. A child could never understand the pleasures of sex, say, because they have no knowledge of what that pleasure could be with a woman or a man you love, because to them their innocence shields them from that. And that's why if somebody rips away their innocence and defiles them in that way, see, with a married couple, we don't speak about innocence being ripped away or defiling, because that's a different state of being. With a child, it would be defiling. It would be violence because they have no understanding of that separate being. They can't understand. A child can't understand the joys of adulthood. And it's funny because there seems to be a lot of kids, or a lot of adults, I should say, who have the minds of children who can't understand the joys of adulthood either. Oh, I hate adulting. You have any idea how great being an adult is? Sure, my eyesight's going and I can barely stand up. But it is so much better being an adult than it was being a child. Your understanding of existence is so much greater now than it is then. To a child, a joy is having a new toy or a sugary treat. To an adult, the joy we get in the presence of our loved ones. See, a child loves a hug from their parent, but they can't understand the depth of love being transferred into them by the parent's hug. Like a child that will never understand how much more it means for a parent to be hugged by their child than it does for a child to be hugged by the parent. They can't understand that state of being, that level where an adult is. And in that way, we cannot understand the heavenly state of being. We can't understand what it is to be at that level and what we will experience there. Because we have nothing to go off of. We have no experience to go off of in that realm. In the same way a child has no experience to go off of in the realm of adulthood. Because any experience of adulthood a child has to deal with at a young age is seen as a defilement of that child's innocence, because they are not ready to be in that state. You give a child too much responsibility too quick, you squash their innocence. So they cannot understand what it is to be an adult, because they don't have that experience. We don't have a heavenly experience. So we don't understand how much better it will be. And here you have two tribes saying, it is so good here, just leave us here. Because what we have here, that other place over there, can't be better than this. But it is so much better. We can't allow ourselves to be tied too much to the here, that we forget how much better it will be there. Then Moses said to them, if you do this thing, if you arm yourselves before the Lord for the war, and all your armed men cross over the Jordan before the Lord, until he has driven out his enemies from before him, and the land is subdued before the Lord, then afterward you may return, and be blameless before the Lord and before Israel, and this land shall be your possession before the Lord. But if you do not do so, then take note, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. Build cities for your little ones, and folds for your sheep, and do what has proceeded out of your mouth. So he's saying, if you do everything you just said, and you go to war, and you spend as much time as it takes for the other tribes to get their inherited land, their appointed lots, then the Lord will hold you to your vow. You will have fulfilled your vow, and you will be blameless in that vow. But if you do not do it, you have sinned against the Lord. That vow will be held against you, and be sure your sin will find you out. When we live in sin, our sin will find us out. It will seek us out. You cannot sin and not pay the wages of that sin. That's why they always say, once you start to lie, you need to lie to cover up for your lie. And eventually that whole house of cards will come tumbling down. And your sin will find you out. There was a story I was listening to and I'm going to tell the story terribly, so just bear with that. But I was listening to a sermon on this to prepare for reading it and going through it. But I listened to it about a week ago as well, so. But there was and it was a real story. It happened in California, I believe. There was a couple going to the beach. Now, there was a person who owned a store who, in fear of being robbed, when he would go to the bank, he would put all the money in a bag or in a bucket. Actually, it was a bucket. He would put it in basically like a chicken bucket. So that way people weren't going to rob him of his chicken, so he would take the money because it was a cash society back in the 70s. And he would go and take the money to the bank. Well, he was stopped. They were at the store. A couple comes in to buy chicken. They are mistakenly given the bucket of money instead of their chicken. They go to the beach, find out the bucket of money is not their chicken, and they go and, they call up the store like, hey, I got a bucket of money. And the owner's like, oh my goodness, that's my bank deposit. So they agree to go back. Well, the guy, news gets a hold of it. They want to do this, person of interest story on it, the slice of lifestyle stories that we saw so much of in the 80s and 70s. And he begs them not to. Like, don't take our picture, don't tell the story. He's like, but you're doing this great thing, returning all of this money. Like, most people would just keep it. And he's like, please don't put my picture in the paper. Don't do this, please. Well, why not? Like, it's, great, you, and we want to do a story on you and your wife. And he's like, no, you don't understand. That's not my wife. That's my mistress. His adultery was found out. Your sin will be found out. He was doing the right thing with the money, but your sin will find you. Remember, we don't just sin against people. Our sin is against God. God sees all. And when he decides it's time to reveal your sin to the world, your sin will be found out. You will not escape the consequences of it. So watch how you live. Because sometimes when you're living in sin, it will be found out. It will come crashing down. Because we are held to a standard. That standard is by his laws, by his objective moral standards. And when we break it, our sin will be found out. We can only hide things for so long. Everything comes to the light when God chooses to reveal it. And the children of Gad and the children of Reuben spoke to Moses, saying, your servants will do as my Lord commands. Our little ones, our wives, our flocks, and all our livestock will be there in the cities of Gilead. But your servants will cross over, every man armed for war, before the Lord to battle, just as my Lord says. So Moses gave command concerning them to Eleazar the priest, to Joshua the son of Nun, and the chief fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel. And Moses said to them, if the children of Gad and the children of Reuben cross over Jordan with you, every man armed for battle before the Lord, and the land is subdued before you, then you shall give them the land of Gilead as a possession. But if they do not cross over armed with you, they shall have possessions among you in the land of Canaan. So Moses is given the command concerning them to Joshua, Eleazar, to the chiefs, that if the children of Gad, children of Reuben, they go over, they cross over, they do what they said, then the Lord is willing to give them the land of Gilead. But if they do not cross over, then their possessions will be among you in the land of Canaan. Like, they're not going to be blessed to stay in this land on this side. They'll be living in sin at that point. Their lots will be in with you, and if they choose not to take them, that will be a sin on them, because they're not doing as they promised and vowed, and not as God had commanded. Now Moses, of course, is talking to Eleazar, to Joshua, and the cheat fathers, because Moses will not be following them into the promised land. And the children of Gad and the children of Reuben answered, saying, As the Lord has said to your servants, so we will do. We will cross over armed before the Lord into the land of Canaan, but the possession of our inheritance shall remain with us on this side of the Jordan. So Moses gave to the children of Gad, to the children of Reuben, and to half the tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, the king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of Og, the king of Bashan, the land with its cities within its borders, the cities of the surrounding country. The children of Gad built Dibon and Athathar and Arar, Atharoth and Siphon and Jazer and Jehogabad, Beth Nimrah and Beth Haran, fortified cities and folds for their sheep. And the children of Reuben built Neshbon and Gilead and Kirjathrim, Nebo and Baal Meon, their names being changed, and Shibba, and they gave other names to the cities which they built. So you may have noticed when they were talking about all the lands that were good that they had conquered, if you remember back to the last census we talked about, the second census, it named the names of the tribes and the people and the families. They were names of those people because they were not what the pagans had called the names of the cities. They were what the names of the cities were known to by the Israelites of the time. That's why he's saying these other names have probably been changed, probably because they were lost. It's possible that those names were changed because those cities were lost back to the pagans, so the names were changed yet again. And the children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, went to Gilead and took it, and dispossessed the Amorites who were in it. So Moses gave Gilead to Machir, the son of Manasseh, and he dwelt in it. So Jahar, the son of Manasseh, went and took its small towns, and called them Havoth Jair. And then Neba went and took Kenneth and its cities, and he called it Neba after his own name. So this is why the things are named the way they're named. And these 2.5 tribes stay in the other side of the Jordan to not cross into the promised land. They fight for them just the people in the promised land would, but it is not the land that was originally promised them. They are not following through as commanded by the Lord, and they will eventually pay the price for it. So moving on to chapter 33. These are the journeys of the children of Israel who went out of the land of Egypt by their armies under the hand of Moses and Aaron. Now Moses wrote down the starting points of their journeys at the command of the Lord, and these are their journeys according to their starting points. As people point out, they'll be saying, well, you really think Moses wrote this all like right before he died? No. Moses was keeping a record, and it's mentioned quite a few times in Scripture. Moses was keeping a record of everything that happened as it happened. As he journeyed, he was writing the entire time. He was one of the most learned people because he was raised as a prince of Egypt. He had a actual official standardized education by the Egyptians. He was a very intelligent person. They departed from Ramses in the first month, on the 15th day of the first month, on the day after the Passover of the children of Israel, went out with boldness in the sight of all the Egyptians. That's where they began. They left Egypt from Ramses, from the city of Ramses. For the Egyptians were burying all their firstborn, whom the Lord had killed among them. Also on their gods the Lord had executed judgments. That's the idea that, or the fact that all 10 of the plagues also were attacks on the Egyptians based on gods they held. So it was the Lord showing supremacy over their false gods who could do nothing to stop him. Then the children of Israel moved from Ramses and camped at Sukkot. Then they departed from Sukkot and camped at Etham, which is on the edge of the wilderness. They moved from Etham and turned back to Pi Hatheroth, which is east of Baal Zephon, and they camped near Migdal. They departed from before Hatheroth and passed through the midst of the sea into the wilderness, went 3 days' journey into the wilderness of Etham, and camped at Marah. They moved from Marah and came to Elim. At Elim were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, so they camped there. So they went to Marah, that was the bitter water. Then they moved from Marah to Elim, which is where they found the oasis. They moved from Elim and camped by the Red Sea. They moved from the Red Sea and camped in the wilderness of Sin. They journeyed from the wilderness of Sin and camped at Dakpa. They departed from Dafka and camped at Alush. They moved from Alush and camped at Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. So that's where they have the stone. They departed from Rephidim and camped in the wilderness of Sinai. They moved from the wilderness of Sinai and camped at Kirbroth Atah. Now remember, they went to Sinai and they were there for at least a year, probably more. So they went from getting the water from the stone to Sinai. After getting the whole law through Leviticus, they move out from Sinai and they come to Kirbroth Atah. Remember, the graves of lust, where they gave into their lusting after meat and stuffed themselves so full that they died. The graves of lust. Do not fall to the graves of your lust. Your sin will find you out. Do not live for lust. Do not live for flesh. Live for spirit. Live for God. They departed from Kirbroth Atah and camped at Hazeroth. They departed from Hazeroth and camped at Rithmah. They departed from Rithmah and camped at Rimmon Perez. They departed from Rimmon Perez and camped at Libnah. They moved from Libnah and camped at Rissah. They journeyed from Rissah and camped at Calathalah. They camped at Calathalah and camped at Mount Shepher. They moved from Mount Shepher and camped at Haradah. They moved from Haradah and camped at Mechaloth. They moved from Mechaloth and camped at Tahath. They departed from Tahath and camped at Terah. They moved from Terah and camped at Mithkah. They moved from Mithkah and camped at Heshmanah. They departed from Heshmanah and camped at Mosroth. They departed from Mosroth and camped at Bene Jaakan. They moved from Bene Jaakan and camped at Hor Haggabad. They departed from Hor Haggabad and camped at Japhatha. They moved from Japhatha and camped at Abernah. They departed from Abernah and camped at Ezion Geber. They moved from Ezion Geber and camped in the wilderness of Zin, which is Kadesh. They moved from Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor, on the boundary of the land of Edom. Then Aaron the priest went up to Mount Hor at the command of the Lord and died there in the 40th year after the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, on the first day of the 5th month. Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor. Now that chapter goes on a little bit more, but we're going to end it there. Want to notice one thing: the starting point of each place. Goes through the starting points of each place. He mentions Kirbroth Atah. He mentions Marah. He does not mention Kadesh Barnea. He does not mention, the Lord does not have Moses record as a starting point Kadesh Barnea. He does not have him note as a starting point the land, the place from where they sent the 12 spies and came back with a bad report and then forced them to wander again. He did not mark that down. Other places he did. That he didn't. Don't know exactly why that would be, because it seems like a pretty important place to point out. But such is the greatness of the forgiveness of the Lord. You cannot make him remember the sin that you have been forgiven for. if he has forgiven you a sin, he has forced himself to forget. He is not going to bring it up. The people sinned and sinned greatly. Now, Moses has brought it up many times, but he's moved on. How great, how precious, how beautiful are the tents, O Jacob, of Jacob. I find no iniquity in Jacob. I find no sin in Jacob. It's because it's been forgiven. These people have suffered the consequences of their sin. Their sin has found them out. But he's forgiven them, and he's watched over them, and they've continued on. Now he's on the verge of bringing them into the promised land. And now we're going to go through the rest of Numbers and Deuteronomy, having the re-education of this new generation and what the Lord has done, what the Lord is going to do, and how he's going to provide for them and what he expects of them. As we continue through this, these last, I think, chapter and a half, 2 chapters, and then of Numbers, and then Deuteronomy. But nothing that we do will be held against us by the Lord after he has forgiven it. Kadesh Barnea, that great turning away from him, is not remembered for the people who turn back to him. This new generation was not responsible for the turning away. So they're not being held accountable when they come back. When we sin, when we fall away, when we live our lives in disobedience and rebellion to Christ, for no matter how long it takes for us to accept him and let him come into our hearts, and we profess our faith and we profess him as Lord and we place ourselves under his authority, when we come to him as that new man having cast off the old, the sins of the old are not held against the new person we have become in Christ. He's not going to say, but you remember that time you did, because we have repented and turned from it and turned to him. We have turned to him because he is our hope. He is our Father. We want reconciliation with our Father. As a father, when my kids come to me at the end of the night, after having done 17 horrible things throughout the day, some of them to me, and they say, Dad, can I have a hug before bed? Dad, can you read us a story? Dad, I'm sorry for what I did. Can you forgive me? I always tell them the same thing. You already know you're forgiven because of my love for you. And of course I'll accept you back into my embrace. And of course I'll speak to you. I'll converse with you. I'll read you a story. Our Father is sitting there. Open path for us to walk down and say, Daddy, Father, Abba. Because Abba actually means Daddy. Father, I'm sorry for what I did. I know I should not have done these things. I will try my best to learn from them and not do them again. Can I please feel your embrace before I go to bed? Father, can I please feel your embrace? Can I please speak to you and tell you how much I love you? His answer is never going to be no. When you want reconciliation, you come through Christ and his arms are wide and welcoming and warm. He wants you to come to him. He doesn't want you to cry about the bad things you did and sit off in your room alone in guilt with a broken heart. He wants you to come to him. Tell him you're sorry. Ask for his forgiveness. You already have it because you're cloaked in the righteousness of his Son. You're his child now too. So you already have the forgiveness. You already have the love. And he wants to hear. He's willing to hear. And he wishes to embrace you. Don't sit back worried about what you did. Worry about what you want to do. Don't let guilt and bitterness keep you from the moment of embrace, the moment of love. Because as a flawed, fallen father, I can't wait for my child to come over to me and say, "Daddy, I love you. Can I please have a hug? Can I please feel the warmth of your embrace?" I can only imagine that a father who loves to a degree I cannot even imagine wishes even more for that very moment where we come to him in the same fashion. Anyway, that's where we will end it for today. I hope this was fruitful for you. I hope to see you again next time. But until then, be blessed.